For the last 10 years that I've been involved in politics, TYT, the Young Turks, has been one of the main left-wing news outlets here on YouTube. And online in general. And now I've never been a fan of them myself. I've watched Secular Talk, Kyle Kulinski a little bit, who was previously associated with the Young Turks Network, but I've never been a huge fan. However, they've been on my radar, and I've seen a lot of people come at them, often calling them rad libs, saying they're not true lefties or not true socialists or whatever else. And recently they got into it with Aaron Maté of the Grayzone after mentioning Aaron on their show and attacking him. So we're going to discuss this. I normally don't like to get too into the leftist infighting, but I think there is something that we can learn from this interaction here from Aaron Maté and the Grayzone, who I have minor critiques of in their interaction with TYT, the Young Turks, and Cenk who I have major critiques of. So let's first play the clip from Cenk and Ana Kasparian's show where they call out Aaron Maté and the Grayzone.
They said Aaron Maté yelled at me. And so
Aaron Maté lied. Aaron Maté. Everyone cares what Aaron Maté has to say, right? Okay. The guy who denies that Syrian children were killed with chemical attacks. Yeah.
And
fuck
gets
Aaron
paid
Maté.
by the...
Yeah, fuck you. Anyway, let's move on. Let's end the freaking pod. I can't.
Okay, see, that's what happens.
I can't stand that guy, and I can't stand the very intentional disinformation they put out there in regard to disgusting dictators around the world. The very people they seem to be working for, to be quite honest with you. Let's move on.
All right, we're done.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
All right, wow. A lot of vitriol there from the TYT host when they're talking about Aaron Maté, telling him to shut the F up. So let's add some context to this. What are they talking about? Well, Aaron Maté was one of the main critics of Russiagate on the left, if not the biggest critic, doing tons and tons of investigative journalism on it that I would recommend anybody check out. And his conclusions were essentially that the Democratic Party had overblown these narratives of election fraud. This idea that Donald Trump was simply a puppet on Putin's strings and Putin had influenced the election and Hillary Clinton would have easily won the election had it not been for the influence of Russia. These were way overblown, and in fact there were Russian troll farms who were putting out pro-Trump memes into the US, and that's essentially as far as the election fraud went. But the Democrats blew it way out of proportion for two reasons. One, it gave them an excuse for why Hillary Clinton lost to a buffoon like Donald Trump. And two, it serves the new Cold War that they're pushing against China and Russia, as China and Russia are forming an anti-US economic bloc, and the US looks to create this new Cold War, talking about being in competition to win the 21st century from Russia and China. Being able to cook up anti-Russia propaganda was very useful at this time, which is what Aaron Maté pointed out. Not to say Russia had no influence in the election, but it was nothing close to the role that the US and the CIA has played, entirely overthrowing and replacing countries' governments, right? It was nothing like that. Cenk on the other hand, has been one of the main lefties pushing the Russiagate conspiracy. He believes in it completely. Second bit of context here about Aaron Maté, he was one of the main journalists conducting interviews with the whistleblowers at the UN who said that there were holes in the US narrative about Assad, the president of Syria, using chemical gas on his own people in Douma, Syria, which was the justification for US missile strikes that turned entire areas of Syria into rubble and killed many civilians. And after these missile strikes happened, senior investigators at the UN who were living and working in Syria at the time, whose entire job was to investigate Syria, came forward and said, the evidence about chemical gas here is just not there, right? We don't have evidence to prove that Assad was using chemical gas against his people, like the UN announced, and which the US then used as justification to launch missiles at Syria. So after they come forward, Aaron Maté helps blow their story up, reports on the story of these senior officials at the UN, and the UN higher-ups respond by calling the whistleblowers puppets of Russia. They're puppets of Russia working together with the Grayzone to push this pro-Assad narrative, right? It couldn't be that the US was lying about chemical gas attacks in order to launch missiles at a president who calls himself a socialist, right? That couldn't be it. We've never known the US to do that. It had to be that Aaron Maté and these UN officials who had worked at the UN for 10 years previous were just puppets of Russia, right? I mean, apparently that's what TYT thinks here, because they take the exact same strategy that the U.S. State Department takes when people are poking holes in the lies of imperialism. You are an agent of a foreign country, they say. Aaron Maté gets paid by the Russian government to report this stuff, says Cenk without any evidence. Same thing the State Department told him when Aaron Maté was poking holes in the narrative about Assad using gas attacks, which was used to justify dropping missiles on Syrian people. What's the other strategy they take here? Aaron Maté supports the killing of children, says Ana Kasparian. He wants Assad to launch chemical gas at children in Syria. This is the exact same thing that the U.S. State Department does with their atrocity propaganda. They make an accusation. Country A and President A did human rights abuse B. And if you poke holes in the narrative that human rights abuse B happened, or if you say the U.S. shouldn't invade this country to stop them from doing human rights abuse B, that means that you support human rights abuse B, right? Because Aaron Maté is reporting on the stories of these senior officials at the UN who are stepping forward as whistleblowers and saying these chemical gas attacks never happened. That means that he in fact supports chemical gas attacks and he wants children to be killed with chemical gas, according to Ana Kasparian. I mean, of course, this is ridiculous. If you know Aaron Maté at all, of course, he would not support children getting hit with chemical gas. He's just saying, hey, children in Syria got hit with a missile strike, and the U.S. justified that missile strike by pointing to this chemical gas attack, and officials at the UN are telling us this chemical gas attack never happened. The U.S. has a long history of doing this, of making up human rights abuses to intervene in countries killing millions of people. Maybe we should or maybe we shouldn't believe them, or maybe we should poke holes, or maybe we should investigate further. But TYT says, no, you're a puppet of Russia, and in fact, you support chemical gas attacks against children. I mean, it's disgusting. This is the exact same thing that the State Department does. So why, TYT? Why are you claiming to be a left-wing organization, a left-wing progressive socialist group, whatever, and you're doing the exact same thing as the U.S. State Department? That is counterintuitive. That is hurting our movement. That is hurting the cause of anti-imperialism. But let's talk about why, at least my analysis of why. So my co-editor Carlos and I often use this analogy. Socialism is like a ship. The sails of the ship are your morality, your ethics, how you see things at face level, how it makes you feel emotional when you see something like a chemical gas attack. It makes you feel sad. It makes you want to do something like that. But the base of the ship, the wood, the strong part of the ship that keeps it afloat is theory. Understanding the capitalist mode of production, understanding capitalist imperialism, understanding how it works, what drives it, and therefore how to fight it. My argument is that TYT does not have that base. They do not have theory. They do not have a theoretical understanding of capitalist imperialism or capitalism as a whole. Whereas I would say the reporters at Grayzone, many of them I've heard recommend Lenin's Imperialism, do have a systematic understanding of imperialism and understand that U.S. finance capitalists are simply looking to expand their territory and control natural resources in places like Syria, right? All this mumbo-jumbo about protecting human rights is just a sideshow to keep you distracted. But it's easy to get distracted if you don't have the material base, if you don't have the theoretical base. If you're just going off the sales and somebody says, hey, this Assad guy is killing his people with chemical gas, you might go, oh, well, let's send in the U.S. military and do something about it then, right? And anybody poking holes in this narrative about chemical gas must be a horrible person who supports chemical gassing. You know, of course, that's not the truth. Of course, if you have the material understanding, you know that capitalism nowadays is based on imperialism and is based on expanding and going abroad and trying to capture more territory using violence and using state bodies like the military. But TYT doesn't have that understanding. So they end up saying ridiculous stuff like this. And to prove my point, I have two clips here I'm going to play. One from Ana and one from Cenk, where they essentially prove what I'm saying, that they don't have a theoretical and material understanding. So let's play those real quick.
For which Kasparian, I mean, it appeared to have been a paid gig for a NATO conference.
Welcome to your MSC. I am delighted to be here and to have a conversation with the former U.S. Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, Madeleine Albright. And Madeleine Albright was actually the first female Secretary of State in the U.S. And it is a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor to have a conversation with you.
Well, I'm delighted to be interviewed by you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Socialism is what we have today in this country. Please don't have your head explode. So what socialism means is the government does some things and the private industry does some things, right? So private industry does Coca-Cola, Nike, makes your shoes. Government does other things like your police department, your fire department, your military. So you like the military? Oh, what a socialist you are. You know, the military is the largest government program there is.
Oh my goodness, that clip of Cenk is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. But of course, the clip of Ana is her meeting with former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and giving her praise for being the first female Secretary of State. Any U.S. Secretary of State in history or for the past 100 years is a murderous war criminal, and Madeleine Albright is no exception. She helped manufacture multiple regime change efforts while under Bill Clinton, and she does not deserve praise for achieving a position of power as a woman. And Cenk, of course, here in his clip just doesn't know what socialism is, so he proves that he doesn't have the material understanding. So that's all I wanted to point out, right? They don't have a material understanding, and what capitalism does and what our system does, our liberal democratic system, is it conceals what's actually going on, right? So it tells you the wars are about human rights abuses, when the wars are about the expansion of capital and the increasing of profit for the capitalists. And what theory helps us do is to see through the mask, see through the nonsense, to see the mechanisms of the system that lay underneath. The mechanisms of the system are to endlessly do war to open up and seize more territory for Western capitalists, and to justify that war with an endless stream of propaganda. So having the theoretical basis and understanding the actual mechanisms of capitalism help you see through the bullcrap and go, oh, what the U.S. is doing in Syria here is imperialism. They don't care about human rights. And because TYT doesn't have that, they end up attacking an investigative journalist who's dedicated his whole life to fighting against imperialism. And like I said, I have critiques of Aaron Maté myself, but they're telling him to shut the F up here. They're treating him like he's an idiot. When in reality, you know, I would argue TYT are the ones who are ignorant, who are the ones who don't understand what's been going on in Syria, and who don't understand the capitalist mode of production and capitalist imperialism as a whole. So Cenk, Ana, I'm sending you both a copy of Lenin's Imperialism. I hope you get it in the mail soon, and then you can stop doing segments like this. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later. Solidarity.